You're listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Now, it is time to break it down.
Welcome to episode number 32 of the Sonny Brown Breakdown. I'm your host, Sonny Brown, and in this episode, I talk to Matt Kwan. Matt is a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt under ʀʌᴏᴏᴡᴜ, and he also co-hosts the podcast BJJ Mental Models with his brother Steve Kwan, who I interviewed in an earlier episode. We discuss the concepts here of belt tests and grading and the differences he places between adults and children, and then explore some essential concepts used by Gordon Ryan and the Danaher Death Squad, including the use of tempo in Jiu-Jitsu, which is described through the terms of offensive and defensive cycles, and blading to redirect frames while attacking, and how these can help you learn your Jiu-Jitsu faster and more efficiently and give you a better understanding of kind of where you are in the battle of Jiu-Jitsu while it's taking place. So it's a very good practical lesson with some up-to-date and important concepts for you to understand. Hope you enjoy it. If you do, please leave us a nice review on iTunes, 5 stars preferably. And also, any feedback you want to send through, the email address is sonnybrown@gmail.com. Love getting all your letters, and may even do a Q&A episode in the future if you've got any questions. And also I'm active on Instagram @SonnyBrownBreakdown. Now let's go to the podcast. G'day, Matt. How are you today, mate?
Good, Sonny. How you doing?
Yeah, good, mate. Good. So obviously I've spoken to your brother before as the other half of your podcast, BJJ Mental Models, and also chatted to ʀʌᴏᴏᴜ and Rory. So I think that's, getting to speak to all the crew up there. And I'm interested to kind of hear your side of things, because I know that from your background, you started training jiu-jitsu under someone else. I'm not sure exactly who, but then actually switched into ʀʌᴏᴜᴜ's academy. And I'm wondering, if I could get a bit of an idea about your background and kind of the scene that's happening over there in Vancouver.
Yeah, for sure. So it's first of all, it's a pleasure to be on the podcast and chat with you. Heard a lot about you. Of course, the only guy to get a go-go plata in a... Was it a jiu-jitsu tournament or an MMA match?
That was MMA. That was MMA go-go plata.
That's even more fucking... Am I allowed to swear?
Sure.
That's even more fucking crazy. That was MMA. That's on some, Nick Diaz shit, but that's wicked. But it's a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Yeah. And, so I'm Matt Kwan. I'm 32 years old. I'm the head instructor of On Guard Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu in Pitt Meadows, which is about 40 minutes outside of Vancouver, Canada. And so just a brief discussion on my background. I started, before I did jiu-jitsu, I was a chef right out of high school. I sort of had an interest in the culinary arts, and, I just started my apprenticeship right away, put in a good, I'd say 8 years before I really decided that I wanted to actually do jiu-jitsu for a living. I started training jiu-jitsu, I believe I was 20. I was just fresh out of high school. Went to my first jiu-jitsu class with a few friends. Of course, they never came back, but I was like, wow, this is really cool. I've always sort of enjoyed wrestling, did a bit of wrestling in middle school, but in high school, mostly my game was hockey, played a lot of hockey growing up. And I was never actually any good at sports, but when I first started doing jiu-jitsu, it was just sort of something about it just clicked with me, and the sequencing and the grappling and just the thinking involved in the sport. And I was like, hey, I'm actually kind of natural at this, so I'm just going to keep doing it. And before I knew it, within a few months as a white belt, I was doing it every day, and I was getting that feeling of guilt if I didn't train every day. So I was like, man, I should just I should pursue this. So I was training at a gym called West Coast BJJ, under a guy named Don Whitefield, who is a De La Riva black belt. And, we had a bit of a falling out because I was training at one of his ex-students' gyms, and he didn't like that. And he said, hey, well, I was a purple belt at the time that this happened, and I was actually teaching for him. And he said, hey, well, this looks bad on your moral character, so you can't teach here anymore. And I'm like, all right, well, clearly I'm not really one to accept ultimatums, so I guess I'm out of here. I left and joined a team called Burnaby BJJ, which is now PTT Van City, Pacific Top Team Van City. And I was with them for a few years, made some great friends, left on good terms when it was time to open up my own school. And just maybe 2 or 3 years ago, fully retired from cooking. And now I'm just focusing on my business, and I'm a father of 2. I got a daughter who's 3 years old and a son who's 1 year old. And I'm just living the jiu-jitsu life right now, loving it, being a, an entrepreneur and being in charge of my own destiny. And when I switched to Бʀᴏᴡᴜ, the reason that happened was because there was talks from some people in PTT that I was, hey, we're thinking about giving you your black belt or whatever. And I thought, okay. So I went to Rob, and I had met Rob as a purple belt. He was actually brought in for a seminar by my coach at the time. And he was talking about levers and frames and speaking in jargon about jiu-jitsu that I'd never heard of. I was used to hearing, okay, swing the hips, leg goes over the head, arm bar like this. Whereas Бʀᴏᴜᴜ would be like, I have a 2-on-1 on the lever. I'm going to place a wedge behind his shoulder. I'm going to swing my legs up. I need to get my spine up so that my back's in alignment, and all these using physics terms basically. And I was like, man, this is such a different way to learn jiu-jitsu. At first I was kind of like, well, this is kind of, for lack of a better word, this is a nerdy way to look at jiu-jitsu. It's kind of a dry way to learn jiu-jitsu. But the more I trained, he went back to Nanaimo after the workshop. And over the next few months, I realized, I'm like, hey, I understand. I'm starting to see where levers are. I'm starting to understand more about my own body positioning and alignment and things like this. I'm like, it's really starting to click with me now. Now, not only am I taking the techniques and things that I already knew, but I'm now applying the alignment principles and, the mechanics principles to that. And it's really working for me. And then, next time I saw him, we hit it off great. I was chatting with him about it and saying, hey, this is really helping me out. And from, the rest is history. We just, I didn't start training under him officially at that point, but definitely, he was kind of teaching me most of my new material at that point. So then it came time, they were considering that I was going to have a black belt pretty soon at PTT Van City. It was actually Burnaby BJJ at the time. And I spoke with Rob, and Rob was like, oh, to be honest, you're not a black belt yet. And I was just like, oh shit. Cause there's most people in the city at lightweight. I had beat most of them, and I felt really comfortable. And he's telling me, oh, you need to work on your guard. Your guard's not black belt level yet. And in the city, you can handle most black belts at your weight class, but I want you to be successful on an international stage, not just in Vancouver. And then at that point I was like, okay, that honest feedback is the reason why, I aligned myself with Island Top Team, because, I was getting criticism that, may not have been nice to hear, but it was really valuable criticism. And, so I focused on a few things, and, when it came time to actually sign the IBJJF certificate, I went with Rob Bernacki's lineage over the PTT lineage, just because he had taught me so much about jiu-jitsu. It was the right thing to do. And now in charge of my own business and teaching jiu-jitsu for a living. It's the best.
Living the jiu-jitsu lifestyle dream by the sounds of it then. And it's interesting you mentioned the story with the promotion, because that was actually one of the things I spoke to Rob about, is how he would be quite strict on his promotion criteria, or at least how he would be, let's say, maybe not strict, but firm, let's say. Firm and fair. He had his criteria laid out, and he was quite adamant that some people would never be able to get black belt under him.
Yeah,
no matter
I was
how
just
long
going to say
served.
that.
And it's sometimes to hear someone say that is, okay, that seems a bit harsh, but I think it's, obviously you've heard that, and it's been a refreshing thing to hear that, that it's certainly you're going to have to earn it. It's not going to be given out. Is that kind of what your thought process was?
I'm a little bit more lenient in that regard than Rob. Rob is pretty black and white in a lot of the way he perceives life, not just in terms of jiu-jitsu grading, but in other things as well. And very opinionated, and I respect that. And again, that's kind of mainly the reason why I align myself with him. But I'm not of the same mind. I do believe, Rob has told me, he said, not everyone can go to university and become a professor. And that's the truth. Not everyone can. And not everyone can have the skills to earn a real black belt and be able to go to any gym in the world and, hang with their black belts and whatnot. But I'm also of this frame of mind that maybe, take my brother, for example, like he's not a competitor at all. He's never competed. He's a black belt. Could he go to any gym in the world and hang with any black belt? Probably not. He just isn't as serious about the jiu-jitsu as I am. He's got a very analytical mind. I'm more of a competitor, right? And
Shots fired,
kind of,
I'm gonna say.
Oh yeah. What else you want to know? Steve's not here. I'll say anything.
Please go on.
But at the same time, I think for my students, there are also other roles that can earn black belts that don't necessarily mean, it's going to sound bad, but like merit, because the truth is not everyone can get a black belt. But what if someone comes to the gym, helps you with, teach kids class, puts in the time, works really hard, never gives up, helps everyone else in the room, and does display a high level of competence still. I'm not against the idea of giving that person a black belt. Maybe under Rob's curriculum, that person might not display everything needed to be a black belt. So I do appreciate the amount of discipline and merit that he requires, but I think I'm a little bit more middle of the road when it comes to something like that. I mean, I guess I'll know when I actually give a black belt. Right now, it's kind of just up in the air what I would do, right? I'm not in the position to give any black belts right now, but we'll see when that time comes. And, I've had a chat with Rob about just sort of switching gears here, but about like kids belts tests, and sure. Saying they don't do kids belts tests at his school. And I don't either at this point, but I was thinking, hey, should I implement a kids belt test? Is that something that you think is a good idea? And he was pretty hard saying no. He's like, I don't think belt tests are good. Are you going to pass and fail the kid? Because if it's a test, it needs to be either pass or fail. And, if they fail the test, they shouldn't get the belt. Like he was very much like, you need to display the merit. And so I was like, okay, I appreciate your opinion. And I went ahead and sort of designed a curriculum anyways that I've actually yet to employ because of the lockdown and whatever, all the crazy stuff going on right now. Haven't utilized it. But, I do kind of agree that if you can't display the requirements, then maybe you shouldn't get your next belt. So I was thinking about it, and then, talk to Cal McDonald, who's actually been on our podcast. He will be on our podcast coming up. We discussed teaching kids. It's a really fantastic episode. I think we're going to have him back for a part 2 on teaching kids. But basically we decided, after we kicked it back and forth a little bit, we decided maybe this is a better idea to just have this test as more of a handbook or a playbook as opposed to an actual test where you will pass or fail. I kind of compare it to, I played American football for 1 year here. And again, I was the smallest guy in the field. I had very little athletic ability. I was very small on the field and fat and not good. But for the first half of the year, they give you a playbook and you learn the plays and you practice. And then the second half of the year is the games. So I figured, okay, well, if we look at this as a playbook and we give it to the kids a few months before their, quote, test, where they have to perform techniques, then at least they have on paper what they need to know. If they don't know it, they can come ask me or they can study on their own time. And also their parents can get involved in it as well. So, long story short, to sort of tie it all together, Rob is very much a pass or fail type guy. Whereas I'm more like, I think a little bit more lenient. I believe that, maybe black belt can't be earned by everyone, but I think a lot of people can earn black belts. And just like with these kids with this belt test, it's like, I think it could be used as a learning tool, not necessarily a test that decides whether you pass or fail.
Yeah, I think that sounds reasonable. I'm kind of in the same position as you, where I'm not handing out belts at the moment. So it's just interesting for me to think about all this stuff of what might theoretically happen in the future. But I think you have kind of hit on a good point with the kids, where it may not always be necessarily about creating, you know, the Cobra Kai school of child warriors. And, you know, you do have to take into considerations that it might be something that the parents want to come along to, and could be something more of a presentation, or, you know, like a play performance that everyone is still going to be a big social thing for the kids, and that they can practice for and put the performance on. And, you know, everyone gets to enjoy it, which is, of course, going to be important if you're running a business as well.
And one thing Cal mentioned was, you know, his criticism of belt tests was that he wouldn't want the kids to regurgitate. You know, he's very much of the mind where he wants to teach his kids how to learn, basically. So not just spoon feed them the information, but to give them the, you know, as to take a page out of Rob's book, give them a problem solving algorithm where they can kind of learn how they learn best, rather than, you know, learn these 5 techniques or whatever. So, you know, where was I going with this? Basically, when the kids take the test, I don't want them to regurgitate. I want them to, you know, to truly understand. I don't want them to, like, when I ask them, oh, what is alignment? Explain alignment to me. You know, I don't want them to repeat in my words what is posture, structure, base. I want them to be in a position and tell me, okay, are you in alignment right now? Like, are you in base? Do you have posture? You know, and that way they can sort of take what they've learned and plug it into any given situation. So you can tell or not whether or not they actually understand the principles, and if they can apply it to any given situation, right? The test also had things such as, you know, like theory, like for the gray belts, it was like, oh, what do you like about jiu-jitsu? You know, what don't you like about jiu-jitsu? Why do we shake hands before, you know, name a time in life when you might have to use, you know, things like that. And not just, okay, do an armbar from guard, right? But I also want to make sure that they can do the solo drills that are needed in jiu-jitsu. Like, can you do a shrimp? Can you do a sit out? Can you bridge? Can you know, what's an underhook? These types of things. So I think there is value in that for kids. I don't think I would employ a belt test for adults, but for kids, you know, if you want to follow the IBJJF model, there's so many goddamn belts. There's 4 kids belts, and each belt has 3 sub belts. So it's like, you know, at my school, I just decided we're not going to do those sub belts. You're either a gray, yellow, orange, or green. But a lot of these schools are doing, each one has 3 sections. And then it's like, well, I mean, you're given promotions all the time. If that's how you're going to do it, it's literally like a traditional martial art, where it's just like the promotions kind of come a little bit easier than we're accustomed to as adults in jiu-jitsu. So, I didn't really want that. I didn't want to always constantly be promoting the kids. I wanted to make them really want the promotion, you know? So I've kind of abolished the sub belts. But if you do it that way, if you follow the IBJJF standards, then, I mean, there's going to be so many belts. I mean, what is a pass or a fail? You know, like if there's 3 different gray belts, it's like, how do you do a pass or fail for that? It's kind of just on your own discretion, right? So I don't really look at testing as a pass or fail thing. I think it's more up to the instructor's interpretations. Yeah,
I think that makes sense. And it's especially, it would have to be hard if you've got a kid there, the parents have come to see him grade, and you're going to have to be the hard taskmaster failing them, and they start crying or something like that. Like, you really got to be living that Cobra Kai lifestyle to get into that role.
Like I'll say this. I don't think I would ask a kid to do a belt test unless I thought they were ready. You know, like I wouldn't be like, okay, you're testing today. And then there's like, oh, what if they don't do this properly? Oh, I'm going to fail you. It's like, I'm not really into that. And it's not because I'm soft. I'm 100% on board for giving kids stripes and leaving other kids behind because they haven't displayed good character or they haven't listened or they don't try. Like I'm totally for that. But if I'm going to give someone the on-guard jiu-jitsu green belt test 2-3 months in advance and say, okay, so you're going to test on 3 months from now. You need to study this booklet. If you have questions, you can come to me. You can ask your mom. You can go on YouTube, whatever. You can look up these moves or just ask me, and we will work on that. And then come the belt test day, they're going to get that belt because I'm going to drill it into them that you need to know this, and it's kind of your responsibility to know this, right? Yeah. And I wouldn't do that unless I felt they were ready for it. So it's not really, It is kind of designed as a test, but it's not necessarily a pass or fail thing because I wouldn't ask someone to test unless I thought they were ready and displayed those characteristics.
Gotcha. So it's like the pass or fail stage has kind of happened before the date that you've given in the preparation period, which is a valuable skill for life anyway, because there's many things that you need to do the adequate preparation for before the big day, like competition, for instance.
And for sure, I think the pass or fail kind of comes when it's stripe day, you know, when because that's where they will see their peers get promoted and they don't. And and I've seen kids who goof off in class and just like, you know, I'm constantly on them. Hey, you got to pay attention. What are you doing? You're not trying. You got to pay attention. You got to pay attention. Okay. Like this is stripe day. You're not paying attention. And then I promote their friends and then they don't get promoted. Completely different tone the next month or so because they want it. So that's where I'm at. Whereas if you get into this, you know, there's a frame of mind out there where you keep promoting kids and then that encourages them to stay interested because you're constantly promoting them. And I'm not a big fan of that. I think that is, you know, especially an art like jiu-jitsu, if you get accustomed to all these promotions, it's like, well, you're going to be pretty disappointed when you become an adult because promotions do not happen fast in jiu-jitsu. You know what I mean? So why give them this false sense of like, you know, we're going to keep promoting you to keep you interested. Okay. Now we're going to stop because you're an adult now. It's like, no, that's not what I'm about. It is earned. You know? And I actually don't talk about promotions very much at all, whether it's with the kids or with the adults. Just it's not really something we discuss at my school. I'm not saying I'm not open for conversation, but it's like if you're here to get promoted, you're in the wrong school. You need to show me certain things. You know, you can't just expect a stripe or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you need to have that mix of both carrot and stick to both, you know, encourage and motivate people, and also there's got to be something that you can take away as well if they're, you know, so that's not rewarded, or to not reward bad behavior. And I guess taking on from that, then, you know, saying that you want people to take more than just, or go to your school for more than just promotions, obviously, is the learning side of it. And with the podcast, you've got BJJ Mental Models. You do go through a lot of different ways of progressing and developing your jiu-jitsu. That's obviously not concerned with stripes, promotions, belts at all. And I'm wondering if, maybe we could move into just some of the ways, or, you know, some of the most important mental models that you have found to be applicable in your journey.
Yeah, so I believe we're going to discuss two concepts today that really changed the way that I roll, and I've learned them this year. The first one is the idea of tempo. So this is actually a chess term, and it essentially, I've heard Keenan coin it before in jiu-jitsu. Okay. And Gordon Ryan refers to it as offensive cycles, defensive cycles. So basically what it is, you know, let's say, for example, I'm in the bottom position and my opponent is on top, right? So if I were to make a grip and off balance my opponent and force them to post hands on the floor, I'm now in the offensive cycle. This is because I have won the engagement phase using grips, and I've made them post on the floor. So I've broken their alignment, and probably either their posture or their structure. So in this moment, my opponent is vulnerable, and my opponent is very unlikely to start a passing chain because their alignment is compromised. So they're more concerned about improving their posture, structure, base. And I have an opportunity now to sweep, to enter the legs, to go for submissions. So that would be an example of an offensive cycle, right? If I was going to discuss an offensive cycle from the top, it would be, let's say my opponent pulls guard on me. They have a collar ankle de la Riva situation or something like that. They have an open guard situation. They've gripped me. So if they've got grips and they're moving me around and I'm trying to, I'm on top and I'm feeling a little bit off balance, I'm in a defensive cycle. So for me to get into an offensive cycle, what I need to do is break the grips that immediately break my alignment. So maybe the grip on the collar. First, I'm going to address that. Break the grip. Then usually what I do, let's say this is gi, obviously. Let's say as soon as I break the grip, I don't just start passing right away. I actually, generally, I will try and either change angles or I will make space. Mm-hmm. So Keenan refers to this as up, down, left, right. Like he likens this to the D-pad on a PS4 controller. Basically, you can move in 4 different main directions, right? So if I break your grip, what's the first thing you're going to want to do? Probably re-grip me, right? Because in that moment, you do not have control over me. So in that moment, that is where I can change it from a defensive cycle to an offensive cycle. So what I would do is I would break the grip and move out of range, just a foot. So now when I've moved out of range for a foot, or I move side to side, now I'm starting to set up what we call a blitz. And this is something I've heard Autos guys use in tournaments, is they create the blitz. First, they'll break the grips, or if there's no grips established, they will just come in hot and try and use angles to force a defensive reaction from their opponent. And once they do that, you put your opponent on the bottom in a position where they can't grip you anymore. They can only frame. So generally, person on the bottom is gripping to look to off balance and close distance and get underneath or whatever, get a dominant angle. And person on top is trying to break those grips and blitz. If the person on the bottom is only framing, then they're stuck in a defensive cycle, because as we know, frames are generally meant to make space. So, long story short, if you're on the bottom, if you're gripping and off balancing, you're in an offensive cycle. If you're framing and trying to, maintain your guard, you're in a defensive cycle. So now how do we put that together, right? As a brown belt, I was very, all through my journey, but specifically at brown belt, I was really just like, how do I get my guard to be unpassable? Like I need to focus on guard retention details. I need guard retention. Okay, I'm going to watch Rob's app, which is fantastic. On the BJJ formula, like guard maintenance and all these concepts. Great. They're all working for me. I can maintain guard. But for some fucking reason, I just can't get offensive. Like I can prevent my guard from being passed, but I'm always stuck just retaining and maintaining. Then I realized, and this could be a Gordon Ryan thing where I sort of realized this, is you need to create pressure from the bottom. Having a reactive game where I pull a guard and then I hold it and wait for a reaction from my top opponent is not a good strategy in a competitive setting, whether it's the gym or a competition. So I realized, I'm like, okay, something clicked for me. When I'm on the bottom, it's not just about guard retention. Guard retention is extremely important in a defensive setting. But what I really need to do is create a grip and off balance my opponent, creating limb extension before they can break my grip and start blitzing me. Once I created that, I didn't create that formula. Once I realized that was the winning formula, my guard is so much better, because now, the saying they say, the best defense is a good offense, right? So if I can always off balance my opponent, if I can always win the engagement battle and win the grip fights and then off balance before my opponent blitzes, I'm always in the offensive cycle. So now the goal becomes, now that I know that's the goal, it now becomes the goal to always just stay in the offensive cycle, whether I'm top or bottom, and prevent my opponent from getting in the offensive cycle. I always want to keep my opponent in the defensive cycle by denying them grips or if I'm on the bottom, off balancing them.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. And I mean, as you're describing it, I can immediately kind of recognize, those moments that you are talking about as, having that distinct offensive or defensive cycle in their nature. And it really is just, kind of becoming aware of when you are the person leading the dance, leading the offensive nature, the offensive cycle, and being aware of when you are defensive, and then knowing the steps that you have to take then to break that rhythm or break that tempo.
Yeah, for sure. If I'm always, so here's the thing. If I'm always playing a reactive guard, good chance I'm playing defensively, which means I'm stuck in a defensive cycle, which usually, at a high level is really difficult to get into an offensive cycle, because once your opponent on top and I'm only using like a high level, like at the black belt level, let's disregard like, oh, I have a guy at my gym who can't pass my 꽞ᴏᴏᴏ guard and he's a blue belt, or like, I don't care about that. I care more about like, okay, I'm going to go do the, I'm going to go do the pans, or I'm going to go do, Oregon Open, and I'm going against black belt adults. Like if you're going against those guys and you pull a 꽞ᴏᴏᴏ guard and you just kind of hold it, you're fucked. You're going to get passed, right? It's a little different if I'm going to pull a closed guard, because I'm using a clamp-based guard with reinforced wedges. So I can my legs will act as an anchor and kind of lock my opponent in. In this position, I can kind of hold my opponent here. But if I'm going to play a 꽞ᴏᴏᴏ guard or a single leg X guard or some variation of open guard, you can't just hold that guard. That was also a big realization I had at brown belt when I was playing 꽞ᴏᴏᴏ. Is like, hey, I cannot just get to this guard and then just hold it. I have to constantly be keep my opponent in a state of kazushi. Otherwise, they start untangling my guard right away, and then they quickly get into an offensive cycle. So, like making sure that I think the best way that people can start to learn this concept I'm talking about with offensive and defensive cycles is win the grip exchanges. And one thing that we've been doing at our school is just we focus probably twice a week. We warm up with grip fighting, and we just constantly drill the grip fighting. Because that is really what sets the tone for the whole match. It's such a neglect. I believe it's changing. I think a lot of schools that actually care about good jiu-jitsu are starting to really focus on grip fighting and gi and no gi, and how that really, how that dictates offensive and defensive cycles. Yep. But that is like one of the main things that we focus on, because that from there we can create off balance, right? Or from there we can prevent our opponent from off balancing, and we can now become offensive. So that is like, that is in my opinion, that is way more important than like drilling arm bars from the guard, swinging back and forth. Like that's when I first started doing jiu-jitsu at West Coast, that's what we were doing. Like, okay, you're going to do arm bars back and forth for 3 minutes. It's great. I'm doing this move on a non-resisting opponent. There's no concepts of alignment or how to actually make them vulnerable. I'm just learning how to do a move. And then when you go and do it in a roll, it's like you might get it on a lower rank guy, but against a better opponent with more experience, no way. So now it's like when we do this, we talk a lot about concepts. We talk about, winning the grip battles. And then when it comes time to do arm bars, we're not just drilling on non-resisting opponents. We're discussing how it breaks your opponent down. How do I use levers for control? What is double trouble? If the arm bar goes wrong, where can I transition to? So it's more of a situational thing with predictable reactions as opposed to memorizing moves. And that's been a huge advancement, I think, in how I look at jiu-jitsu.
Yeah, I think it does sound just like a much more efficient way and productive way to learn things, really. And I mean, what you're saying about grips there, I'm totally on board with. One of the main things I'll tell people, especially if I'm coaching at competitions, is, your grips or no grips, and just, hammering that into people when they're rolling, of just, if you don't know what to do, strip whatever grip your opponent's got and try and establish your own. And
exactly.
Then, I'll sometimes even jokingly oversimplify jiu-jitsu it's just, and say when we're doing grip fighting is that like, jiu-jitsu is just a grip fight. That's all it is. It's just a matter of who can win the grip battle.
Mm.
But kind of what you're saying with putting it into that frame of it being in the offensive cycle is kind of has made a click for me, because it allows it to be like the grips is not just the start or the finish of the match. It is a moment that you want to keep progressing through on the grip fight. It's not, you don't just get your grips and then stop. It's it's a ladder or a sequence that should lead you all the way to the finish, which then makes sense as being jiu-jitsu again. So, I mean, that kind of, for me, that all kind of links up and makes sense. Is there anything then in particular that you'll get people to do to actually, get that concept down in training?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll just, Friday is, we have no gi class. So I'll just run you through kind of what we did yesterday.
Yeah.
And, I firmly believe that at least 60% of class, if not more, should be live training. I don't mean free rolling. I just mean like, when we introduce a concept, we will drill it for a few minutes, non-resisting, and then right away we start making like a mini game out of it. This is actually I've heard Keenan talk about this. Jonathan Thomas, who's been on our podcast recently, always talks about mini games. So basically, we discuss, and this is just, first of all, just from the double seated. So we're just, okay, your goal is to get a 2-on-1 on your opponent. You're either going to get a 2-on-1 facing up, 2-on-1 facing down, 2-on-1 elbow. Those are kind of your main grips that I want you guys to get. And if your opponent's not giving you his hands, I want you to start throwing in snap downs from the seated position. So they get used to grabbing the head. Again, the head is one of the most underrated grips you can use, just from the bottom position, snapping and even from wrestling.
Wrestlers know that for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So we just fight for 2-on-1s. And the game is, if I get a 2-on-1 for 3 seconds, I win and we reset. So we do that for a few minutes, maybe switch a few times. Then we start incorporating variables. So maybe I'll say, okay, now the goal is one of you is going to be on your knees, and your goal is to either, hold your collar tie your opponent's head, or grab their wrist or grab their legs for 3 seconds. And their goal is to get their 2-on-1 on you for 3 seconds. So again, we run that through, we go live. The person on top is not really trying to win, but more so just allow the person on the bottom to see where the grips can happen. Okay, so we do that a few times. Mm-hmm. Then we start incorporating a little bit more of a live scenario. So again, this is sort of going off of, I don't know, Gordon Ryan should be paying me, and I'd like him to, because I'm always mentioning him. But, if you follow his passing system at all, most of his no-gi passes start with him splitting the legs. So basically entering the headquarters position. So we make a mini game where the person on top, their goal is to put the seated guard player on their back in the headquarters for 3 seconds with their legs with one leg in the middle, like a headquarters. Person on the bottom, their job is to, first of all, deny that inside position. So they always keep their feet on the inside, and to either get a 2-on-1 and elevate into a leg entanglement, or to get like a double koichi sweeping backwards. So they can go for sweeps and get 2-on-1s and snap downs and all that great stuff, enter the legs. If they do any of those things for 3 seconds, they win. So if I sweep you for 3 seconds, I win, we reset. If I get into single leg X for 3 seconds, I win. If I elevate you into a cross ashi for 3 seconds, I win. And the person on top, they're not trying to pass. All they're trying to do is put the seated guard player into a supine position with their foot in the middle. Okay, so if I put you in a half guard and I pin your back to the mat, I win.
Yep.
If I put you in a ďeľahiva guard and your back's on the mat, I win. So what this does is it encourages the person on top to get into their headquarters passing position, which is, I think the best passing position for no-gi now, at least as a beginning position, because then from there you can go to top half guard pins and things like that. So I think that's like the hub position that I love to pass from now. And it teaches the person on the bottom to always win the grip fight and always immediately off balance. It teaches them to get the inside position. And it teaches them that if the person steps in the middle, that you don't need to concede to your back, that you should instead be framing and posting and be mobile and play angles and manage distance from the seated guard. So you never get stuck in a situation, or at least you minimize the times you get stuck in a situation where you end up on your back and your opponent is basically like, because once you're on your back and in any jiu-jitsu scenario, you can't really make space anymore. You're now playing a ꜱᴏᴏᴏ or a reverse ꜱᴏᴏᴏ or a half guard, right? So again, it's like we're reiterating the grip fighting battles, but we're putting it into a context that will allow you to stay in a seated position and stay offensive.
Yeah, okay. I like the idea of those, the gamifications and the mini game to build that up. And I'll probably try and play around with that this week. I think it's a great idea to let them develop those skills. And then, so you will actually then reinforce that this is this is one part of the offensive cycle when you're establishing grips. And I guess in jiu-jitsu, there's really no time you want to be in a defensive cycle, right? You want to be in the offensive cycle the entire time, unless you're a crazy meme sub player who just wants to let someone take your back and hopefully cross their feet, and you can.
Yeah. So if you want to do bad jiu-jitsu, then you can. Essentially, yeah. I mean, if I was just gonna simplify it, just like you said, it teaches the person on the bottom to always be in an offensive cycle. It also teaches the person on top to also always be in an offensive cycle. But,
that's why it's trying a fight. Battle at least.
For sure. And it's a live scenario. So you're getting real reactions, which I think is the main difference between my teaching, methods now versus 4 or 5 years ago. Is before we would do the drills where, we're going to do arm bars on an unresisting opponent now, right? Like, I think that is necessary to when you're learning a new technique or if you're teaching beginners. But as soon as that technique is sort of picked up, it's now time to put it into a live scenario. And I think the best way to do that effectively is to remove factors like submissions and even guard passing. Like, I'm not asking the person on top to pass. I'm asking the person on top to just get to the headquarters position, because from there, the person on the bottom has kind of conceded the grip battle. Like, they haven't been able to off balance their opponent really successfully yet. And they haven't dominated the inside position. So in a way, they kind of lost that engagement phase, right? Now, I know there's going to be like ꜱᴏᴏᴏ players and reverse ꜱᴏᴏᴏ players that are going to be like, hey, I always do that, right? But it's like, yeah, but this is, I'm basing this off of sort of how Gordon plays his game. And when we're talking about no-gi, it's like, you just can't deny it. His stuff is the gold standard right now.
Pretty good benchmark.
Exactly. So when I'm watching stuff he does, I'm like, okay, well, let's drill what the best in the world does, because he's got really good systems and really good concepts and mechanics. So we just base mini games sort of around some of the things that he shows. But it keeps it live, but also not so stressful that you're worried about getting submitted or whatever. It's not spazzy. It's a lot like how Rob does his fuck your jiu-jitsu type drills, where it's basically target sparring, but you remove certain variables or you handicap someone, they can't do something, like in his case, sometimes they do fuck your jiu-jitsu with guard retention. So it's like person on the bottom can only frame. They can only frame. They can't make grips. And then that way you work your defensive cycle stuff, because you do need to have slick guard retention as well, where if you are under pressure, you can dig yourself out of that hole and get back to a situation where you might be able to become offensive again. I do. I've spoke to Rob about that, and Rory too, actually, and the whole way that's set up, I'm quite interested in. And I do find it interesting how I feel would have to be some kind of point where a beginner has to go or has to reach before they can
really understand the kind of the value in the game like that, where, you know, they to appreciate the win of getting someone onto their back from seated to supine, or, you know, sitting up to on their back, as we used to call it. And, you know, and really feel that that's a win, because without kind of that model of what a full jiu-jitsu experience or role would look like, it might just seem a bit, you know, abstract of why that even would matter. And one thing you did touch on there is the importance of getting someone on their back and making them, you know, less mobile, pinning them in one way or another. And I think that might touch on to another one of your favorite mental models or concepts, which is blading. Is that in the ballpark? Yeah.
So the second mental model I wanted to talk about is, and this is something, again, I've picked up this year, and I've heard Danaher use this term. I've heard Gordon use this term. Blading is essentially just it's turning the axis of your shoulders and or your hips to deflect frames. So if at any time I do like a hip switch, that's an example of blading, right? So the term blading, I believe, you know, is it's sort of taken from the anatomy of a knife. Of course, a knife has a long, flat, sharp blade. So if I'm how can I describe this? If someone is applying pressure onto me and I'm creating frames from the bottom and their shoulders are completely square to me, then I'm going to have a pretty large surface area to frame off of. But if they turn their shoulders to the side, it does a few things. It is kind of like turning the blade of a knife to the side. It becomes thin and sharp. So by turning your shoulders on, when somebody frames on your chest, let's say, you turn your shoulders, it does two things. It makes the surface area smaller of your shoulders, because you're now taking a wide surface area and turning it and becoming narrow. And it also changes the angle of force. So if I'm driving straight down on top of you with my shoulders, you can establish your frames, and then I'm not going to be able to have access to, let's say my goal is to get chest to chest, because that's kind of that's where I like to get to now, is when I'm in like top half guard and stuff and floating from headquarters. I like to get chest to chest. So my goal is to get chest to chest, but I'm putting pressure on you and you're posted on my chest. So what I'm going to do is turn my shoulders to the side. So let's say I'm not wearing a gi, right? Because if I'm wearing a gi and I blade, you could still have grips attached to my lapels by proxy, and it might not break those grips. I still blade in the gi, but no gi is really where you notice blading. So I'm driving down on you, Sonny, and I'm actually on top now, and you're framing on my chest. If I turn my shoulders to the side for that moment, because I've changed the angle of force, your frames become deflected, and you'll notice they kind of just slide off of my chest. So it now becomes a situation where I can get slightly closer to getting chest to chest, or I get chest to chest, and you now have to reestablish frames relative to the force vector, right? Because the force vector changed angles now. Maybe instead of me driving my weight down on top of your chest, I've actually turned my shoulders, and now I'm kind of moving sideways. So your frames become useless at this point. And then from there, I can use this to sort of start to create breakthroughs and maybe even get chest to chest. So this is like, I can do it with my shoulders, right? The example I just gave you, you're framing on my chest, I turn my shoulders and your frames kind of slide away, and then you need to recreate new frames. Or if I'm in the headquarters position, a great example would be to just cut my knees to one side and maybe put you in a folder pass. So this is like a great concept that you can use to just redirect frames. Cause you know, as you know, when I'm in the headquarters, you have a sticky hook in between my legs, and then the other leg is on the outside. So usually your shins and your knee are going to be a nice frame. So in between my legs. So when I start to blade my hips and change the angle of force, now your hips start to become collapsed. So you actually need to like either off balance me right away, creating an offensive cycle, or you need to hip out a little bit and realign your body to my new force vector. So it's a great way when you're passing, especially no-gi. It's a great way to kind of fuck with the guy's frames from the bottom, because really doesn't take a lot of energy from me from the top to blade like that. I can do this without giving up my base, without exerting any more force. And it just creates such nice angles. And it can also, it can also prevent like if you try and elevate me with your sticky hook and try and elevate me overhead and put my hands on the mat. If I blade my knees to the side, it's very difficult for you to elevate me now because you're no longer elevating my torso head on. You're now trying to elevate me when my hips are now misaligned to your hips. So it's a really fantastic way to approach guard passing in no-gi. And anyone who's got Gordon's DVD, you can see this constantly through his instructionals. He's always talking about how he's blading his hips, blading his shoulders. And it's a really fantastic way to deal with frames. I believe he did it. A really strong example would be like when he fought Romulo at ADCC 2017. He did like a hip switch and totally passed Romulo's guard. And then of course he took his back and finished him. So again, I mean, God, I talk about Gordon so much on the instructional. I don't want guys to think like I find him very entertaining, but it also his instructional. I find a lot of his concepts that I've learned from him over the last year or two have just really helped my game. So, that's definitely a mental model that I recommend people look into.
Yeah, I think look, it's understandable to want to study the best person in the world or, the best people in the world. And I mean, those guys are undoubtedly at the top of the pack. I mean, so I don't think there's any, in some ways I've kind of recommended to people when they get, what instructional can I buy? Should I buy or something, get something from Danaher. But then I'd say like, watch it to the point where you can recite what they're going to say. You already know what they're going to say back,
Yeah.
You should be able to understand the content so much that it does become a slight obsession, because then that does mean that you are absorbing it rather than just, glossing over something and not taking it in. So, but the blading concept, then I mean, I understand exactly what you're saying, and it seems like it is something that is going to come up in a lot of nearly all situations of jiu-jitsu and maybe combat sports, where it is kind of making sure you have the dominant angle on your partner where you can apply force onto them and they can't efficiently apply force onto you. Is that correct? Like for instance, I'm thinking like half guard. Obviously, you want to be bladed off to the side so that your opponent is not chest to chest with you, right? Would that still be considered an example of blading?
I don't really use blading from the bottom because in fact, I can't really even think of a time when I would use blading from the bottom, because when I'm on the bottom, I kind of have two different purposes, right? One of them is to manage distance with frames, meaning I'm in a defensive cycle, or grip and off balance, which would mean I'm in an offensive cycle. It's more from the top that I would blade from. And so to just put it into context, let's say I'm in a half guard or a headquarters situation from the top. So, we've all been here. I'm trying to get to like a chest to chest pin. This could actually be a great mini game as well. Start from the headquarters and try and get chest to chest.
Yeah.
And pin your opponent's shoulders flat. If you do that, you win, right? So that's another example of a mini game that we do. But let's say I enter someone's half guard and they've got their knee shield, they've got their hands in the way. You know how strong of a position the knee shield is, right?
Yeah.
If you approach a knee shield in one force vector and you don't change your angles at all, you're just going to be stuck there all day. There's literally no way to break through two hands posting your far shoulder and the shin coming across, and it's just a nightmare to get past. So what you need to do is start creating angles. So by getting mobile and turning your hips, turning your shoulders, now your opponent is forced to react to that. There's no way that they can just stay there holding the knee shield and expect to keep you there, because now your angle of force is changing. And essentially what blading does is it just redirects frames. So if I'm on the top and you're framing on my shoulder and your arms are, extended and you got your shins there, I'm going to think about how can I change the angle of my hips and my shoulders to deflect your frames. And then every time I do that, hopefully I get one step closer to getting to my goal, which is chest to chest and ideally turning your hips away from me. So those are kind of like the goals that Gordon outlines in his guard passing DVD. He always wants to get the guy's head and shoulders pinned flat and turn their legs away from you when he's passing. And that's kind of it in a nutshell. Like, it's a really simple idea, but it's just the act of changing the angle of your shoulders and or hips. And that limits the surface area from which your opponent can frame. And it changes the force vector, which deflects frames.
I think I get you now. So it really is just the action, or the action of changing the angle of hips and shoulders when primarily passing or deflecting frames. Is that?
That's right.
It's the action itself, not so much a position or anything like that. That's
right. Yeah, it's the action, and it's generally the action in an offensive cycle because, if you're gripping me and off balancing me, I'm not blading. I'm probably posting my hands on the mat if you're off balancing me properly, and I'm trying to regain my alignment so that I can break grips and salvage the position, right? Basically just reset the position. So anytime I'm stuck in a defensive cycle, you can catch like an arm drag and you can off balance your opponent. But generally speaking, I try to kind of dig myself out of that hole first and reset. So if I can just reset, then I can, get myself in a safe space. But it's really hard when you're just like constantly under pressure on the bottom and your opponent's just blitzing you. It's hard to get offensive from there. You already fucked up because you lost the engagement battle. So the key, again, to take it back full circle is to win the engagement battle, win the grip fighting and off balance right away. And in a no-gi setting, I'm passing your guard, you're framing. That's how I'm going to dress your frames. I'm either going to try and pummel your frames, so get the inside position by pummeling underhooks or bicep ties or whatever. Or if you're framing my chest, if I feel like I can't get an underhook, I'm going to just start turning the angle of my shoulders and my hips, and hopefully that will create some movement where I can possibly break through some of your defenses. Okay, so then it does sound like you got to create that moment of bringing it back to Cobra Kai of strike first, strike hard, and never let up on the opponent as you're going through. And is there, what ways would you give for people to interrupt that? Is there ways to practice interrupting someone's offensive cycle other than just hunkering down and waiting for the moment to clear a grip and re-attack? Or is there any way that you've figured out to kind of really make it explicit what's taking place? So it's going to be very situational. Like every guard is different, right? Every guard has its different characteristics, and even more different if it's gi versus no gi, because the grips change. In the gi, I could grab your collar and elevate you, and that could put me in an offensive cycle because it could off balance you. In no gi, I could collar tie you, but it's also more of a shit show, and it's not the grip isn't as fixed as it is in the gi. My recommendation to my guys to sort of dig yourself out of the offensive cycle is try to get back to a seated position, usually by framing and then creating a post and making some space. You can sometimes, if my opponent's in the headquarters and I'm on my back, I can get back into the offensive cycle by reaching up, grabbing their head and pulling them over top of me and forcing them to put their hands on the mat. Or I can sometimes, if they're right over top of my chest and, I feel like they're crowding me, I can take V grips with my hands on the inside of their armpits and elevate them over top of my head. Once I bring their head over top of my head, I have an opportunity to either entangle their legs or just get back into a guard, because again, the same thing is achieved in both examples. I make them post their hands on the floor. So if you think less about, okay, what can I do from every position? You're going to just clutter your head with too many details. Think just, I need to put my opponent's hands on the floor. I need to make sure that they're off balance. And that's where, in this situation, Gordon, he puts his hands on the floor to start float passing, but he's choosing to do that, right? There's a difference between me off balancing you and forcing you to put your hands on the floor and the top player choosing to put their hands on the floor. Because if the top player is choosing to put their hands on the floor, generally they're already in base and they can start leg pummeling. And that's sort of what Gordon does. But if I force you to put your hands on the floor, then you're now in a state of off balance. And that's when I can recreate whatever kind of position I'm going to create and become offensive again. But generally the goal to disrupt the offensive cycle from the bottom. If I'm on the bottom and my opponent on top has the offensive cycle, if I want to disrupt that, I need to off balance them. That's basically it. If I'm on top and I'm in the defensive cycle, my opponent's gripping me and off balancing me, I need to break grips. Fine. And if it's no-gi, I pummel one leg to the inside position. And then from there, I can start to pass. Or if it's gi, usually putting your leg on the inside isn't necessarily a great strategy because De La Riva is very effective in the gi, right? Because of all the grips. So in the gi, when I'm stuck in a defensive cycle, but I'm on top, meaning I'm now being off balanced like crazy, usually what I'll do is just address the grips, break the grips, and then I'll make space and back out and then just immediately start blitzing before my opponent can find a grip again. So one blitz that I really like to do is in the gi, I really like to funnel towards either top half guard pins or double unders. Those are kind of my main passing positions that I like to get to. So what I like to do a lot of the time, if I break their grips and I back out, now I'm on top and no one has grips, I now start creating angles side to side. But I'm not within gripping range yet. It's almost like I'm running around my opponent. And so what they have to do is they have to do things like high leg, like recover the guard by throwing their leg over top. And usually from here, you can find double unders positions if you force your opponent to continuously high leg. Like maybe you leg drag them and then they high leg, or you run around to the side and then they high leg. That's where I see these Atos guys get into double unders positions. And yeah, double unders is a really common situation at the highest levels in gi jiu-jitsu. You're going to see it almost every tournament,
And then I guess once you get those positions, then you're just confident that you can keep forcing the offensive cycle there.
That's exactly right. So once I get into a double unders or once I get into a top half guard pin, I'm kind of, I'm making money now. So I'm just going to keep pursuing that. And now I'm in the driver's seat and my opponent's really got to work to get out of that. Sometimes, especially in the gi, like if you get caught in a double unders in the gi, like that could, against a good opponent, that's the end of the match. Like you're fucked at that point. It's really hard to come back from that situation. And, you're getting exhausted. Your back is your diaphragm, your ribs are getting damaged in some cases under some pressure. So it's just, you never want to get funneled to those positions.
Yeah. Especially as you get older, I've got pretty much no interest in getting stacked on my back.
Same, man. Like I got a DVD on crab ride and berimbolo. And now, man, it's crazy. Now that I'm a black belt, my game has simplified so much because I just realized, hey, if I do these positions, sometimes I get stuck upside down, and I just don't want to fucking get stuck there anymore. Yeah. So now my game's okay, as I get older and as I move along through the belts, my game actually becomes simpler. And I remember as a purple, I was like, I want to do all this upside down stuff. I want to do crab ride and berimbolo and all that stuff's great. But, you turn 32 and now it's oh God, my back is starting to bother me. My hips are sore. I'm going to start using games that are simple and, make the opponent work more than I have to work, basically.
That's exactly right. I was talking with some guys about a detail the other night, and it was just a small little thing that, probably blues purples aren't going to really appreciate that, but black belts are going to see that and really enjoy it, because the thought process is, I can do that and use heaps less energy. That's going to be something I can do. And, that's going to make it easier. It didn't look cool, but hey, I can cut a couple of deep breaths.
Yeah, especially because I'm a gym owner. So it's like every day I basically have to roll.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay. And I have to roll with my big guys too. So it's like, I'm going to try and stay as safe as I can and use as little energy as possible, because I'm going to have to come back here tomorrow and train for another 2-3 hours. Right. So
exactly.
It's better to, I'm not going to say don't learn that stuff, because you should definitely get my instructional, but
exactly. Yeah, get that instructional, of course.
Yeah.
And learn it so you can repeat it as well.
But also, yeah, I do think even if you're an old school player, like, you should understand that game, because it's very important to know all positions. But at the same time, you know, create your high percentage funnels that make you keep you in offensive cycles and keep your opponent in a defensive cycle. And that's kind of my mantra lately.
Yeah, I agree that I think that's a pretty good mantra to have. And yeah, especially I feel the same way with, the Danaher stuff, that you kind of have to be staying abreast of what they're doing just so you don't fall too far behind. It's just kind of,
sure.
At some stage, I think it's undoubtable that it's going to just be, they're leading their way pretty much. And I guess just to wrap things up, then I guess the simplification then of the tempo was really kind of, I was thinking of it in terms of the old video game Killer Instinct and the combo breaker. And the way on the bottom, you're generally going to be looking to off balance the person on top, and then on top, you're generally going to be looking to break the grips of the opponent to get back into an offensive cycle. And then gi, it's more likely that there's going to be more grip fighting going on. Is that a simplified version, or I wasn't that confident on the gi part though?
Yeah, I think both gi and no gi, there's going to be heavy emphasis on the grip fighting. It's just that the gi is going to seem the grips are going to seem so much easier to get because they're, you're grabbing fabric. No gi, the 2-on-1s and stuff, they become a little bit more difficult when your opponent's slippery or greased, as Gordon says. And they are a little bit trickier to figure out if you're a beginner. But you need to be able to get 2-on-1s and mix up, one concept I've thought about is that I actually got from Gary Tonin is when one lever disappears, another one appears. So if I go for a 2-on-1 on your arm and you pull it back, a lot of the time your leg is there for me to grab, or a lot of the time your head is there for me to grab, and vice versa. If I snap your head down and you posture up, either your hand will be there or your leg will be there. So it becomes kind of a game of sequences where I'm trying to attack a lever and then I'm anticipating your defense so that I can, get the next best lever and immediately start off balancing from there. That's kind of what I see from Gordon Ryan. That's what I see from Gary Tonin, especially when he's wrestling. You wonder, how does this guy get into these high crotches? Like, I don't know if you saw that match with Davi Ramos that he had a few months ago. He's just entering single legs and high crotches at will. Like, how is he doing that? It's because he understands, and I think it's on his Shoot to Kill DVD, where you attack a lever, it disappears, another one immediately opens up. And so from there, he's chain wrestling. And the concept of chain wrestling applies from the bottom position too, except we are chain off balancing, I guess, fighting for lever control. But it takes practice. It's something that, if you're a gym owner and you're wondering sort of what should we be working on, I guarantee you should be working on grip fighting.
I like it. That's a great way, I think, probably to end this conversation. Just bring it all back down to grips, just off balancing and grips. What more is there to it, really, And it's certainly opened up some good concepts for me to think about and how I can implement them. And I've really appreciated this chat, Matt. And if people want to get in touch with you, obviously the podcast, BJJ Mental Models, and what are the other best ways for them to go about doing it?
Yeah. So, of course, you mentioned the podcast, BJJ Mental Models. If you become a Patreon member, you can have access to our Discord chat where we actually have a live chat. We we take people's rolling footage and we narrate it and send it back. You can become a member there. We appreciate all the support that we get from there. And of course, if you have any questions, you can just message me on Facebook. You can go to the On Guard Instagram page and message me there. Of course, if anyone's in the Vancouver area, well, I know not a lot of people are traveling outside of their countries right now, but please come in and visit us in Pitt Meadows. That's another thing, always welcome at my school. And that's basically it. I'm just preparing for a match, actually, that I agreed to at the end of October against a guy named Lucas Wilhelm. And I believe it's going to be streamed on the Alliance Surrey Facebook page on October 30th. So he's a really high-level black belt in the area. I think he's originally from Montreal, so that's going to be a fun match. It's 10-minute no-gi, all subs legal, sub-only ref's decision match. So excited about that for sure. It's nice to have something to actually train for. I just got to stay uninjured long enough that I can actually make it to the fight. But yeah, that's about it.
Oh, that sounds good. We'll make sure you win the grip fight, stay in that offensive cycle.
All I think about now.
And what was the DVD again? Make sure you plug that. It was with is it out on with Stephen Kesting? Is that?
Yeah. It's a DVD with Stephen Kesting. It's called Modern Jiu-Jitsu. It's all about barambolos, crab rides, and rolling back takes. It's got some pretty cool stuff in there.
Sounds pretty funky.
Yes, it is. It was definitely a fun project, and that was when I was sort of at the height of my berimbolo phase. But now my game, like I said, my game has become much more simplified. It's funny how things evolve over the years, right? My game is always changing, so it's one of the reasons why I love jiu-jitsu. Exactly,
yeah,
as
it should. It should. You don't want to stagnate, and that should be the name of the game. So yeah, thanks so much for this chat, Matt. I really appreciated it, and hopefully we can do it again in the future. And maybe we'll have to run a poll and see who people preferred, yourself or Steve. It could be a hot topic of debate.
Yeah, let's do that. And thanks a lot, Sonny. It was a real pleasure being on your show, and I hope you guys all enjoyed.
Sure,
take care.
Thanks so much, mate. Bye.
You have been listening to the Sonny Brown Breakdown. Until next time, you can visit sonnybrown.net to find out more ways to break it down.